All right, I think we'll start. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rihanna Marasti, and I am a Master of Architecture student in the Department of Architecture, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Indigenous Design and Planning Students Association here in the faculty. So we wanted to introduce the third part of our Honoring Our Mother speaker series. The purpose of the series is to discuss our collective responsibilities to Mother Earth, taking care of and honoring her through design and planning. We find it's important to hear from members of our community that are not necessarily correlated to architecture or design, but can speak on critical topics such as land relationships, identity, climate activism, photography, and community resiliency. And today we're going to hear from Kevin Settee. Kevin was born and raised in the downtown West End of Winnipeg, with roots in Matheson Island and Fisher River. A university dropout, Kevin focuses on lots of his work on social justice, Indigenous rights, and Indigenous storytelling through photography and video. Kevin Settee is the writer and director of the Lake Winnipeg Project, a four-part documentary series on the life and culture around Lake Winnipeg. He will go over an overview of the project, the design, and application of community-based filmmaking. As a first-time writer and director with the National Film Board of Canada, an emphasis will be put on the challenges of becoming a filmmaker and working in a pandemic. And I will hand it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Rihanna, and to your Students Association for inviting me to talk. I'm really honored to be able to do this and to share my experiences. I haven't really been able to speak about my project yet with the National Film Board, so this is my first time actually like doing a presentation after the kind of work, some of the work has been done. And I just like to say thank you to the people who are here. There's like 53 people, which is awesome. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I just have pictures and a bit of text at the end, but I'm just going to explain a little bit about the process of filmmaking that we took with this project. And I'm just going to share as I go along. So thanks again for joining, and we will get started. So it's a Lake Winnipeg project, community-based filmmaking, and I'm just going to introduce myself. So my name is Kevin Settee, and this is a photo of me here at Matheson Island. My grandmother's from Matheson Island. My grandfather's from Matheson Island. My granny's from Fisher River, and on my mom's side, my family's from Dauphin River in Little Saskatchewan, and they're all on Lake Winnipeg. And you know, I didn't really think that I would ever get into filmmaking. It's a new thing for me in the past 4 years. This picture was actually taken by my grandmother, and my grandmother was a photographer, and she always had a camera with her everywhere we went. She had a little leather case and a little camera. And when I was young like this and a little bit older, she used to buy me cameras, and I used to take my own photos. And I just wanted to rep the University of Manitoba sweater there that I'm wearing, and my little mullet there. So yeah, and so this is Matheson Island, and I hold Matheson Island dearly in my heart because it's one of the places that my grandparents used to take me all the time, and I really love that place. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the Lake Winnipeg Project. So basically it's a 4-part documentary series on Lake Winnipeg, and it's funded by the National Film Board of Canada. The 4 locations that we shot in were Matheson Island, Hollow Water or Camp Morningstar, Poplar River First Nation, and Fisher River Cree Nation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use photos from each community as a way to kind of tell how we did community-based storytelling and these documentaries. So I'll start off with Matheson Island, and I just want to share that when it comes to filmmaking for me for the first time here, I realized that filmmaking is like 95% community visits and research and figuring out what the story is going to be with the community. So in this photo, you see the producer, Alicia Smith, and she's with one of the fishermen, Ronnie Whiteway. And this is just like an example of us meeting people, talking to people, getting to know the community, and figuring out story together. And then this next photograph is us in the Bombardier. Just we're going out with them fishing in one of the mornings in one of our community visits. So one of the things that we did with the Lake Winnipeg project is we visited as many communities around the lake as we could at first with no cameras, just meeting people, talking to people, and seeing if this is something that people were interested in. And then after we kind of did this kind of tour or visits and stuff like that, we then began going to the communities with our cameras and taking some photos and showing, you know, what's possible. Another big part of the project was our social media. So whenever we had community meetings, like maybe there'd be like 10 people, 15 people, 50 people. It varied on the communities. But for Matheson Island, we had maybe about 10 to 12 people that showed up. And we basically used that as an opportunity to let people know who the NFB are, who we are as filmmakers. So the director, the producer, and the director of photography. And it's basically just an opportunity for us to like share what our goal is. And if they have any questions of us, they can ask us. And so these meetings were kind of used as an opportunity to say, like, to ask basically, you know, can we film in the community? Is this something that is possible? Is this something that would be okay with you? And it was a little bit nerve-wracking because you never know, and people could just straight up say no, you know, if they don't like you, if they don't get a good vibe from you. So that's one of the big things that we had was the community meetings, and they're really important. So we would stay in the community for maybe a week, and we would, at the end of that week, we would let people know that this is kind of what we're thinking for a story and if it's okay. And most of the time they would say yes. And then for the other people that were there, but we weren't going to be able to document their stories, we did social media stories. So here, this is Debbie Lattiser, or Debbie Lee from Matheson Island. And what I did is I would take pictures and I would write a short story and I would post it on social media just so that we can have people's stories included that aren't in the documentary. So Debbie Lee, this story was about her and how she ran the post office at Matheson Island for 35 years. And the original story was just supposed to be about her working the post office and what that meant to her and all the things that she experienced and learned. But what ended up happening was she started sharing a little bit more, you know, more than the post office. And she started talking about how, where her family was from, where her parents were from. And she shared a story about how she was born. And basically the story goes that she was, her parents got married, and on their way back to Pine Dock, the SS Kenora got stuck on the lake and she was born on the water. And so I was really fascinated by that story, and I just asked her if I could take some pictures of this model boat, and she said yeah. And then as we were talking, she said, if you want, you can see the birth certificate, and the birth certificate actually says born on Lake Winnipeg. So I said, sure, I'll take a picture. And so she shared it, and you can see where was the child born. It says SS Kenora on Lake Winnipeg. So social media stories were a big part of helping to tell more stories and to include as many people as we can in the storytelling process on Lake Winnipeg. The next kind of community that I'll talk about is Hollow Water, Camp Morningstar. And so for Camp Morningstar, I don't want to get too much into what the documentary is about because I want people to watch them, but it has to do with the land and resource extraction. So for me, a big part of it was like hearing people's stories about the land and talking about the land, and also like exploring the land and understanding that place. And I was invited out when they kind of first opened up the camp, and they asked if I'd be interested in helping to tell the story. And I was just starting off with NFB at this time, and it took about 6 months or 7 months to finally figure out a plan that we could shoot there. So part of that was a big thing that I learned with, you know, working with Hollow Water is ongoing consent. So it's like you always have to, for me, I always wanted to make sure that I had consent about the story and what was being shared and who was sharing. And because it was a camp to protect the land, there was a lot of people involved. So Hollow Water has a lot of voices. So making sure that, you know, people's voices are being equally shared within the documentary. And then also when we did finish the documentary, making sure that everyone had an opportunity to see the documentary. So that's another part of the consent, is like, once we're finished editing the documentary, showing the people and hoping that they give us the approval. And if they don't give us approval, or if there's things they want us to change, then we can change those things. And so this grandmother here, when we made the edit, there's about, I think about 8 people or 9 people in a 12-minute documentary. And this elder asked, she wasn't included in the edit, but she asked. And so we did include her in the edit, and she talks about the water and the lake, and it's something that we just missed. But it was really important to, to have that ongoing communication, because if she wasn't able to share with me that she wanted to be included, and that she felt like there was something that she said that should be in there, if we didn't include that, that might have left a bad taste in people's mouths or something. So that ongoing consent is like really important. And then, yeah, like just like having fun and making sure that everyone's like having a good time, and making sure that everyone's seeing those documentaries. The other, moving on to Poplar River. So this is Poplar River First Nation. This is Eddie Hudson and Paul Roblowskis. And so with Poplar River, when we first went there, Eddie Hudson was able to take us around and show us the lake. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity, because he shared a lot about, about the history of Poplar River on the lake, the history of the fishing, and how things used to be a long time ago. And out of all the places that I've been, in Manitoba and the world, I would say that, Poplar River on Lake Winnipeg is definitely one of the most beautiful places. It kind of feels like it's an untouched place, because it's kind of further up on the east side of Lake Winnipeg. And when we were there, it was just amazing. The sounds, the smells, like how many birds there were. Like there were so many different types of birds, and that's all you could hear when, when we were there. It was a quiet day. It wasn't rough on the lake, and it was just an absolutely beautiful place. And so with Poplar River, we did work with the counselors, and the chief. So when we did do the community meetings, I had to get approval from the chief and council to shoot the documentary, and I had to present at a band meeting too. I presented at one of their band meetings, and I talked about the project, and like basically the chief and council like nodded their heads and said that it's a good idea what we were planning on doing. The other thing about shooting in communities that I learned, that it's important to support like the local businesses where you're going to be working. So like if there's local lodges or food catering. When we had our community meeting in Poplar River, we had a big feast, and we hired the local grandmothers and the feast folks to make a bunch of food. And so always trying to think about how we're kind of giving back to communities while we're working there. This isn't actually in Poplar River. This is actually in camp in Saguin for Camp Morningstar. They had a 1-year anniversary, but feasting is really important. So for this process, ordering food and having food in community meetings was really important to us. And yeah, so, and this guy here is really important to Camp Morningstar. He's another person that we weren't able to include in the Camp Morningstar Hall of Water documentary, but he was like so vital to that camp as a cook. And this photo of him is actually him in his element, because for the camp he did a lot of the work behind the scenes, supporting financially, bringing food every day to that camp, and just helping in any way possible. And that's one thing that I do feel bad about with that documentary, is not having him included in there, because he was such a vital role and a vital voice and a support and a continued support for Camp Morningstar. So Reggie, it's just like Reg Samard is his name, and I just love that guy. And that's another thing about the project as well, is like all the relationships that were built through this project, um, and all the friendships that I've made and that we've made as a production team is like was really amazing, and an honor to be able to be a part of that. So this is Fisher River, the last place where we shot, and this is Vince Crate. And when we first started talking to Vince was actually maybe like a year before we started filming. And this is another community where we worked with the chief and council, because I kind of started this documentary during the pandemic or throughout the pandemic. And when we kind of had that first wave. And so for working, in the pandemic, I really had to learn how to, respect, this, my community. It's my community, but I wasn't raised there. I was raised in Winnipeg. So it's like I had to respect the community's boundaries during COVID-19. And for myself, I'm kidney transplant patient, so I'm immunocompromised. So I had to be very mindful about my health, but also the health of people in the community. And so working with the community, like I had to get approval from their chief and council, from their board, to work in the community. And anytime I was going to go there, I had to let them know, and I had to get approval, for shooting and stuff like that. And I had to have, all my PPE, personal protective equipment, and trying to wear a mask like all the time. So that's another big thing that I learned is, that's also part of the ongoing consent of working with the communities. It's really important that you work with the chief and council, that I worked with the chief and council. The other thing about Fisher River too is like the social media stories that I was able to do. So part of the social media stories as well is like building trust with people and telling the stories for me. Because I think there needs to be, you need to build trust with people. And there's this thing I kind of learned about filmmaking is that there's like a line of trust. Like there's different levels of trust that you go through when I was making these films. So for like, Fisher River, I have family in Fisher River, but I was never raised there. So, I don't know a ton of people there. So like, I would say like that the first kind of line of trust is the chief and council. They have to trust that what I'm going to be doing, the stories that, we might be telling are going to be good and like positively reflective of the community. And with the pandemic, we weren't able to have the community meeting. So what I had to do is I had to like call people and message people, and message people on Messenger, like text people. And with one of the people that's in the documentary, her name's Sharon McKay, just texting her, she was a bit nervous because she heard my name, she kind of knew me, but she didn't know if it was actually me. So I had a hard time, connecting with Sharon at first, just through texting. And then she asked her boy about me, and her boy knew me, so she was more comfortable with that. And then when it came to filming in Fish River, all the other documentaries were shot. We had a production team, so it was usually my producer, Alicia Smith, the DOP, which was Scott Parker, and then myself as a writer and director. This time, because of the pandemic, I had to go in by myself. So I actually shot the Fish River documentary by myself. I did all the writing, the directing, the sound, and it was a big learning curve for myself. And the other thing, with Fish River is after the first wave, there was an opening, and then the second wave came and they kind of shut down again. So, finding the right time to go to the community and shoot was really important, to make sure that everybody, felt safe, that they kind of knew what the plan was going in, was really important. And yeah, it felt different, with the pandemic. I was very nervous because I didn't want to get anybody sick, coming from the city. I stayed at my uncle's in Peguis, and there's an elder living at my uncle's, and I was just really nervous. So tried to be as safe as possible. So yeah, I'll continue on. So basically, like I'll just kind of summarize the four docs and community-based filmmaking. So the first thing I would say is that it's a privilege to be able to work in the communities where my families are from. What I've learned through this project is that filmmaking is an expensive art form, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. These are our stories, these are our lives and our spirits. I think that our stories are connected to our spirits, and so I don't think that filmmaking should be taken lightly, or that we need to do a good job when we're doing these stories. Like I said before, there's lots of trust that needs to be built before filming in communities, and there's a lot of trust with the stories too. What kind of stories are being told, how we're telling those stories. And I've been in positions where I've shared my story and my story was misrepresented, or my community was misrepresented. And that's the last thing that I want happening when I'm doing these documentaries in the communities around the lake. Like I said, there's lots of responsibility in telling accurate stories and representations of the communities, making sure that the voices are being heard. For me, I wanted to help, not help, but I wanted to tell stories of people that their voices aren't always heard, or you don't always see these people in documentaries, and to show people things that they might not have seen before, around our lake, around Lake Winnipeg, but also to make the films feel like people can relate to them as well. So making them relatable to people. So there's lots of responsibility in telling accurate stories, and the stories are very complex too, and have a lot of deep meaning. Another, summary point, I guess, is making sure that there's ongoing consent and updates of where the project's at. So, with the four communities and all the people that were involved in the documentaries, like letting them know where we're at, when we're editing, what we're editing, when it's going to be done. And just because it's been about 3 years since we first started this project, and it's just been the pandemic slowed it down quite a bit, and especially this last few months, like 6 months, 7 months. And we were actually supposed to do 5 documentaries, but we ended up just deciding to go with 4 documentaries, especially with this second wave and how hard right now the North is getting hit with the pandemic. So the ongoing consent is, I think that's, one of the most important things, is keeping people up to date, because I've heard stories of, while I was meeting with people and talking to people around the lake, that people will make a documentary and then you never see them again. They don't know where the documentary went. They don't know how they've been portrayed. They don't know where that documentary is. So I made sure, in the beginning, in the development phase, to let people know that, you're going to be in charge of these stories. You're going to have a say in how they're being told and what's being shared. And they'll have the final say in the documentary. So once the documentary has been edited and finished, people see the documentary and they can say yes or no. So that's a important thing for myself, is making sure that people know what's happening. So where are we at now? So we are currently like almost done. So we're doing the motion graphics design right now with James Monkman, finishing the edit of the last documentary, Fisher River, with Jordan Malaro, where I'm actually screening the film with the Fisher River people tonight on Zoom, kind of like what we're doing right now. We got to work on the credits, and the sound design is happening right now as well for all 4 documentaries. And then it goes to color grading. And while all this is happening as well, I need to start planning the online release, like how we're going to release them to the public. So what we're thinking is we're going to do like put them on the website, the NFB website, on YouTube, and I'd also like to have them on Facebook so that they're kind of easily accessible to everybody, and maybe even Instagram, to have them on Instagram so people can watch them there. If people have recommendations, you can, I don't know if people can type in the chat, you can recommend some ideas for how we can release them or how we can show them. We're also getting like DVDs made, and we're going to ship them to the community so people can watch them at home on their TVs or on their laptops. I was even joking around saying that we need to get VHS as well for some people, because some people still have VHS. Also like USB sticks, getting USB sticks to people to watch on their computers. So I'll go into like the last 3 kind of slides. So what have I learned as a writer and director in this project so far, that planning is 95% of filmmaking. If you don't have a good plan, a written plan going into a shoot, you're wasting your time. You need to have an idea of what you want visually, sound wise. You need to have a vision for the documentary too. And you need to have a story in terms of what is being asked. You need to have that story kind of figured out. And then the other thing as well is that we shouldn't dictate, especially if we're not from that community or we weren't raised in that community, like we shouldn't dictate the stories. The communities tell us what the story needs to be, and we help craft that story with what we ask, the visuals and the sounds. And for this project, I think that was the foundation of this project, is that we don't go in there with our own ideas, that we go there and we work together to work on this story together and make a documentary together. It's not me, coming from Winnipeg and saying, this is what I want to do. I want to make a story about this. I want to make a story about this person. It's a collaborative approach that needs to be done. And a lot of people do have ideas, and it does happen a lot, that type of filmmaking, but that's not what we're doing with the Lake Winnipeg project. And that the community should always have a final say in whether or not that story is told. Even when it comes down to the final edit, like if they think that we did a bad job, then they have every right to tell us, and that we wouldn't screen that, or we wouldn't put that documentary out into the world. Continue on with like what I learned. So as a writer and a director, like always taking field notes when visiting and talking to people, make notes after you leave community in terms of story. When in production as well, like taking notes on what I could have done better, the types of questions I could have asked that could have gotten, maybe more information or different answers, or what could have I said, differently. And then working in the edit suite, so like working on the edit, like being in the edit room when we're putting the story together, is for me is just to stick to the vision. So like relying on the early writings, like relying on the writings from the community, being in the community, and the document that I put together before we go to the community, what's it called again? I can't even remember what it's called. A treatment. So kind of relying back on the treatment, and having a good working relationship with my producer and DOP and editor was really important. And teamwork is really important as well for myself in the edit suite, and making sure that everybody's ideas and visions are being respected, and that we're, being respectful of each other and working as a team. Because for me as a new writer and a new director, I relied a little bit on the editor as well for story. Just because he's been doing it for a long time, and same thing with Jordan, they both have experience, so kind of relying on them a little bit. Yeah, so that's a few of the things that I've kind of learned from that. And then I guess this is one of the last slides, the vision for the documentaries. So the vision for the docs is that people will watch them. They'll learn about who we are as Anishinaabe, as Cree, as Métis, as Indigenous peoples, and respect our people more, and also respect our stories more. I hope that these documentaries are used in schools, in universities, in the wider public to educate folks about who we are and what life is like around the lake. The people in these films can use these documentaries to help tell their stories. And so, um, like I like doing this, like helping to promote it. But once the documentaries come out, for the people that are watching and listening, and also to like the U of M, when these documentaries come out, I want you guys to invite them. I want you to invite the people from the communities to come and speak, and to take care of them well, and to make sure that these stories are being told in a proper way. Because I can only share, I feel like, my process with these and how we made these documentaries, but really these are not my stories. These are the stories of the people in the community, and they should be the ones to be getting the invitations to speak, um, to universities, to schools, and to organizations or stuff like that, or conferences. um, so that's one thing that I hope that these films can be used for. And yeah, like the last one is, like, I don't want to be the spokesperson for the documentaries. I'm the writer, I'm the director, but ultimately they're the community stories. um and then the last thing I guess I'll share, um with the project, and I missed a lot, like I missed a ton of stuff, but there's only so much I can tell with like the short amount of time. um the last thing I would share too is that, um it did put a lot of it puts a bit of stress on my family, because me and my partner, especially during the pandemic, and my partner, she took on a lot of the labor at home and the work at home, and especially with the Fish River documentary. um when I was traveling to Peguis and Fish River, my partner, was pregnant. And so I say, thank you to my partner who helped support me throughout these documentaries, to help tell these documentaries. And we just had our baby on January 18th, and she's a healthy baby, and mom is healthy. And so, um, this last month has been very hectic and difficult at times with finishing the documentary and wrapping everything up. But I am very thankful, to my partner who's been there and to support me in my work in doing this. And um, yeah, and just thank you to as well to the communities that, allowed me to come to the communities to work with you. And I just love the documentaries so much. I could watch them 100 times. And I know that the communities, when we showed them, the people who are in the documentaries, Matheson Island, Fish River, Poplar, or not Fish River, Poplar River and Hollow Water, that, they love the documentaries. So, um, when they are released, I hope you all watch them, and I hope you share them with your family. I hope you share them with your friends, and I hope you share them on social media, because social media is going to play a big role in releasing these documentaries, because we can't gather in person. The original idea was to take these films and go to every community around Lake Winnipeg to have a feast and to do like a giveaway to give these films back to the communities. And we can't do that anymore because of the pandemic, and it's pretty heartbreaking. But um, we got to adapt, and we got to make sure that we um, forge forward and move forward and make sure that these documentaries are getting out there and that these stories are being heard. Um, so I don't know how much time I have left. I don't know if I went over or if I'm under, but I think I'm in the 30-minute mark or something. But yeah, just thanks again to the Students Association for inviting me and to share. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, for presenting us your process. And I know I've been looking forward to seeing the films as well, but it's really important to go through that community research and organization in your filmmaking. So I think we'll open it up to questions. I do have a few myself that I wanted to ask you just to start it off with. And I know you spoke about that 95% of community research and how that is really important to, I guess, the process, and that kind of correlates with our own process of design. But could you explain more of what that process looks like, and what the steps that you take in translating those important stories of community?
Yeah. So the first step, I guess, in our process was going around and meeting people, going around and talking to people, um, and getting feedback on whether or not this is something that needs to be done, that can be done, that's possible. Um, and then the other part, and like taking notes, like taking those notes, writing about what's happening, you know, trying to stay up to date with what's happening with the fishing industry, what's happening with resource extraction, what's happening to the water, what's happening in the communities. Um, so making sure that I'm kind of keeping up to date with what's happening and what's kind of relevant. And and then the other part of it too is the big part of it is the community meetings and those. So we usually have about a week or like 5 to 7 days before we shoot to go and just meet with people and talk to people and learn what's happening and taking as many notes as possible and um, reading and writing and figuring out story and um, that's a big part. So to do that for every documentary, you know, to meet with people, to talk to people, um, and then so that week, and then you meet with people, you talk to people, you have the community meetings, and you write all your notes, and then you kind of have to work to to make that story, and then to present it to the people to say like this is what we're thinking. I remember in Poplar River, we went there maybe 2 or 3 times. We had like a pipe ceremony with some of the elders, and I did a couple social media stories. Like I went out on the land with Eddie and Paul, and then I also went on a boat ride up the river, up the Poplar River to the first couple rapids. And then I remember Ray Rablowskis, which is Paul's dad. He said, like he's kind of just like, so when the hell are you gonna get going? Like, well, what's the story? Like, you got to tell us what the story is too. Like, you can't just keep asking a bunch of questions. Like, he's like, it's up to you. Like, you're the professional, or you're the writer. He's like, it's like whatever you want to do. So yeah, so it's like a balance too of like what people are telling us, being in community, and then also just like writing the story and saying this is what we're gonna do. Um, but for me, like you don't want to overstep the boundaries too much. Like you don't want to just talk for a couple days and then all of a sudden it's like this is what we're doing. You know, it's like finding that balance, and it's different with every community. Um, and then yeah, before, so like shooting days are only maybe like 2 or 3 days. You only shoot maybe 2 or 3 days. So all that work, there's like years of work that lead up to 3 day shoot, a 3 day shoot, or a 4 day shoot. Like literally 2 years of work for to make a 10-minute documentary or 15-minute documentary. So that's where that 95%. I don't think it's a real number. I'm just guessing 95%. But to me, that's where that kind of comes from. And then writing the treatment as well, like writing a treatment. So like making sure they have the sound, a couple paragraphs of what the story is, what you want to capture, and then giving that to the DOP, or the director of photography, or the camera guy, so that he knows what to get. And then also developing the questions. So the questions help inform what the people are going to share, what they're going to talk about. So you got to make sure that you have the questions ready to go in the treatment. And then there's a lot of emailing between myself, the producer, the executive producer, going back and forth with the community, messaging people, calling people, talking people. Um, it's all leads up to that point where you're going to shoot the shooting days. And it's just a ton of work, and it needs to be done carefully and properly. And yeah. And the other thing I would say too is like, because it's my first time, like um, there's so much more that I need to learn. And there's mistakes that I did make, some mistakes that I think I made, um, especially with the Fish River doc, because I was by myself. In terms of what I wanted to capture, I shot I think I shot like 4 or 5 hours worth of stuff, but to put that into a 15-minute documentary it's a lot of work to shuffle through all that film. And then I could have had my questions planned out better. But it was my first time by myself, and yeah, so that's what I mean by the 95%. It's a lot of work, years of work leading up to the shooting days.
Great. And we have a question from the comments. So this does work with kind of your process as well, but generally speaking about the profession, what is one thing you wish someone would have told you before you attempted to start the filming of your idea?
um I don't know. I I have I don't really have much to base my like I have no frame of reference because this is my first project. But one thing that I would share, it's not related to the project, but it's related to just Indigenous storytelling in general. And that this is such a big project, like financially it's a big project. I don't even know exactly how much it costs, but I would say hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's like, for me, and I think for a lot of Indigenous filmmakers, like these kind of things and these kind of projects, we don't even dream about these projects. Like we don't even think about these projects. We don't even think that these types of things are possible, to be given this kind of opportunity. So I felt like I was very lucky to be asked to be a part of this project in the beginning, and to work on this project and to take this project on, because like this is something that I would never even dream of asking. Like it's something that I would love to do, but it's never something that I would actually dream of doing. And because with this documentary I was actually brought on as a co-director, and then the other co-director left, and then I was by myself. And so yeah, it was just an interesting time. And so yeah, I would say to like Indigenous filmmakers and writers, to dream big, like dream as big as you can, and make a plan, get your ideas written down, and figure out how to pitch. And um, yeah, because I feel like there's not many projects like this that have been done by the NFB with the amount of resources that was put into it, and like um, the yeah, it's just like a privilege to work on this project kind of thing.
And we have a question in regards to the Fisher River documentary in your process. And when someone's curious if the film shows the new solar farm project and how it empowers the community.
No, the Fish River documentary doesn't have that in it. Like I shot the solar farm, I shot video of it, and but I'll just share a little bit about the documentary. It's actually about two women, Kaylee Arthurson and Sharon McKay, and it's about like motherhood, parenting, and also the impacts of COVID-19 on their lives. And so it's like a film that's it's really right in the community. So it's like shot in the homes, it's shot in their garages, it's shot in the community, on the lake. Um, and it's different from the other documentaries in that it's like very, very right in the community. It's kind of similar to Matheson Island, I guess, but like for Poplar River, there's nothing actually shot in the community itself, but it's on their traditional territory. And then the same thing with Camp Morningstar, there's no shots in people's homes or buildings or kind of anything like that. It's all on their traditional territory. And same thing kind of with Matheson Island, it's like half on the water, on the lake, and then a little bit in their homes and in their garages and stuff. So they're all kind of different. They all have different stories, but they're all kind of connected in a way.
Thanks. And we have another question from the comments is what inspired you to start the journey of showcasing these stories, and what led you to filmmaking?
Yeah, so For myself, I guess like my grandmother was a photographer. She got me into photography. She used to buy me those little disposable cameras all the time. When we would go to Matheson Island, she'd let me take pictures. I actually have the photo album right here. My granny used to make photo albums for me when I was a kid. And like every time we go to the Matheson Island, she would take pictures. And so like she'd take pictures of me and my cousin like on the land and on the water. And so my granny was like a storyteller too. And she used to make books. She used to make like books and stuff like that. And so this is my grandmother, Dorothy Crate, Dorothy Settee. And she used to take us on the land and stuff like that and take photos. And then when I was older, my parents bought me like a little video camera in high school. So I made some videos with that. And then I got involved with the University of Winnipeg Students Association. I was actually the president for a year and a vice president for 1 year. And during that time, I also helped co-found a magazine. And during those 2 years, those 3 years, I had a lot of interactions with media. And a lot of times our stories were kind of being misconstrued or not being told properly. And that kind of led to Red Rising, making a magazine, did a bunch of magazines together. Though I'm not currently involved with Red Rising, I stepped away from the collective. At that same time with Red Rising, I was also working with the Prairie Climate Center at the University of Winnipeg, and I helped make maybe about 8 documentaries in Alberta and Saskatchewan about climate change and what's happening with the resilience that's happening there and the changes and stuff. And then I got tapped on the shoulder by the NFB, and they invited me onto this project to work with a co-director. They were kind of in development. And then I started like sharing my ideas, and then we started working together, and then the co-director dropped out of the project for personal reasons. And then I took it on myself. I took it on as a writer and a director by myself, and a lot of my family lives around the lake, in Fish River, and Saging. I have family in Saging, Dauphin River. Although I've only been to Dauphin River once when I was like a little kid. um, this project also allowed me to reconnect with people, with family, with friends. But out of it was just like a great opportunity to work on it and to do these documentaries. So yeah, that's kind of my journey, I guess, my journey to the NFB. And actually right now I have a hockey documentary in development, profiling professional NHL hockey players. So hopefully, that'll be my next project. And I would like to continue working with the NFB, maybe on not short documentaries or feature documentaries. But I also have dreams of doing a project in Winnipeg, in the inner city, my home community, and talking about social justice and racial justice and just the things that need to happen, the things that need to change in our city and in our province.
If you have a little bit more time, I do have one of my own questions to ask you. And if anyone else has a question, you can put it in the chat or directly to me. I wanted to know, I guess we all wanted to know, in terms of like the filmmaking process, what is the most influential for you?
The most influential?
Yeah.
I mean, I think my favorite part of the documentary so far, because I haven't released a film, so I don't know what that feels like yet. But so far up to this day, it's like the photo that you see in here, like being able to learn about the lands, about the stories, about the history. Like I've learned so much through this project by talking to so many people. Like I probably talked to over 60 people, 70 people about Lake Winnipeg. And then, you know, Eddie Hudson, this guy here on the left, like he has so many stories about Lake Winnipeg, about Poplar River, about the history. And I learned a little bit about every community when I went to do the community visits or the research. And I just felt like that was the most influencing part on me, on my experience. And then also like when I got to screen the documentaries with the people to get the final approval, you know, when people get emotional, when you show them and they say that this is everything that they thought it would be and better, that was also a very I wouldn't say influential, but it made me feel so happy. It made me feel so good knowing that this process that we took on of like meeting with people, talking to people, and developing these stories together, that's the process that needs to happen. That's how documentaries need to be made, you know, for these stories to be told properly. And you know, often what does happen is people just have ideas and they go to a community and say, this is what we want to do, this is what we're going to do. And oftentimes communities will do those things, or they, and it doesn't turn out the way they want it to be. So the whole the process, the research and the meeting and exploring the lands and learning the history of these communities, and yeah, I don't know, the whole thing, I just love the whole process, everything to date. I just love it all. It's like if I could do filmmaking like full time for the rest of my life, I would love to do it forever. Yeah.
Could you share the social media handles for us to follow, as well as where we can find updates for the Lake Winnipeg project?
Yeah, so I don't have an Instagram yet, but I'm gonna create an Instagram to help promote the documentaries and just to share. So kind of the way I'm gonna promote these documentaries is I want to do like biographies on the people that are in the documentaries. So just sharing their names, who they are, and maybe like um, what life is like, what life has been in the pandemic, or something like that. You know, something to get people's attention. Um, so for Facebook, it's just the Lake Winnipeg Project, and then for the Instagram, it'll be the same thing, just the Lake Winnipeg Project. And then when they are released, they'll probably be on the NFB website. Just type in Lake Winnipeg, and it should pop up. Sorry, my mouth is just dry. My throat is just dry here. Yeah. Well, the other thing I forgot to share is that in the communities, a part of our giving back was doing workshops. So for Matheson Island, we did a workshop at the school. We did like a 2-day filming workshop with them, and we made like I think 2 or 3 documentaries, small documentaries. And then Poplar River, we did the same thing. We did a filmmaking workshop for 2 days, and they made 2 documentaries. And then with Poplar River, we also gifted cameras, or camera, tripod, and microphone, so that they can start, you know, documenting their elders and their stories, however they wanted to do that. And then for Fisher River, because we were in a pandemic, we couldn't really have the community meetings, and I couldn't really do workshops or anything like that. So that's one thing that we did as a part of our development and as a part of our community work is the filmmaking workshops. And yeah, the last thing I'll share too is like when I first started the project, I didn't have a camera. And what I did was when I first started getting paid from the NFB, I invested in my own camera. And I bought a nice Sony camera, that's good for both video and photos. So throughout the project, I developed my own skills as a photographer, and I used the social media as an opportunity to develop my writing as well. So like every opportunity that I had to learn or to update my skills, I took those opportunities with this project, because I knew that this was a special opportunity, and like most of these photos I took on my own. Like I took this photo, I took this photo, um, I took these photos. Um, and the other thing too is like hiring people in the community. So for Matheson Island, we hired a production assistant from the community to do sound. And then we also like hired, if we had people that we were working with, like community advisors, we hired those people, we paid them. Yeah, there's just so much I just forgetting and just remembering as we go along. We also hired like production photographers. So like Jonathan Ventura took these photos in Camp Morningstar, which were just beautiful. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, for presenting us your work and talking to us all today. I think we'll wrap it up in terms of the talk today, because I think we're nearing close to 1 right now. But like I said, I really want to say thank you for speaking to us about your process and showcasing these stories. And then I think we're all looking forward to seeing the films themselves. Maybe we can have you back here again in the future, maybe even the community members, like you said, to discuss a lot of their stories of their community. So thank you so much. And I think we'll leave it off as that.
All right. Thank you.